This relationship, information in the relationship, information, not the element itself, this mother, I can move into the attribute. Okay, I can specify another attribute relationship, and this is the information which you have is related to the format of the attribute. So it should be attribute name equal sign, and then value of the attribute encapsulated in a double quotes. We don't use double quotes here. So if you decide to go on attributes, and then you have to use double quotes. That was the point of the slide. So next thing which we are going to do is use this application for to explore XML, practical XML. So this application is located on a website. So let's go back here. If you go to the portnoy.com/data, that will be XML, and then XML presentation here, and then there will be zip. It's called zip. So you open it, and then you go down, because there are several nested folders there, until you hit this XML learner.exe. Okay, so after that you extract it to some folder on your local machine. So don't double click here. It will open, but you will not be able to use it. So see, and then browse it. So extract it to, in my case, I extracted to say XML folder. Okay, don't double click here. Okay, application will be open, but you should not be able to use it. You go to this site. Okay, you find the XML presentation, and you find the zip, which belongs to the XML presentation. This one, we have HTML, PPT, RTF, and zip. Okay, double click on the zip file. I mean a zip link. You should you're supposed to see this opening XML presentation zip. So what you can do, you can say open with as a default one. Say open. Okay. When you click open, you should supposed to see this this window, browser window. Now you see documents and settings. That's not what we are going to extract. Double click on it. Again, double click on it. Whatever. We have several nested folders all the way until you see these two files here: XML PPT and XML learner.exe. Okay. After that, you simply click on that. Select XML learner. Don't double click on it. Select this one, and at the top you have a button which is called extract. Okay. When you click extract, it will prompt you to extract to the local drive. You have to specify location here. So you can extract to the desktop, you can extract to any folder you like, but please remember where you're extracting. Okay? Otherwise you will not be able to find it. Okay? So in my particular case, I extracted to CXML. After that, after you extract it, you can close this. Okay. Now, if you're working, or if you have personal computer, please make sure that you have the following application installed. Okay. So you're supposed to have this application, which is called Microsoft Framework. .NET Framework 2.0 installed. Okay, if you are going to work at home and you're working on your personal computer, you have to have this application installed. It's free downloadable from Microsoft site, but please don't install 3.5, don't install 1.1 or 4.0, 4.5. You need 2.0 exactly. Okay, otherwise you will not be able to work with this application. Okay. So all lab machines here, we have this application installed, framework installed, so it should not be a problem here. Just in the case if you like to do it at home. So navigate to the folder when where you extracted this XML learner, and make sure that you don't have any XML documents here, except the test which we created in this case, but you should not have any XML documents. You should not have upsettings or relatives.xml. These two documents, if you see them, it means that previous class created them, erase them. Okay, delete these two XML files. If you see upsettings.xml and relatives.xml, especially if you're working from desktop, if you see them, just delete. Okay. Now, next thing which I'm going to do, I'm going to double click on this application to invoke it. Okay, and then when I double click on this application is invoked, and it looks like this. So make sure that you see this. Okay, and with exactly the same colors and exactly the same style. Okay, you should not see any colorations here. Works? Okay. Sure. Yeah, this is correct. Transparency, yeah, it's in Windows 7. Anyone experiencing a problem with XML Learner? Okay.
Extract file.
Okay.
I choose, for example, desktop. Okay.
Okay.
Now open here.
It should have only one file there. So what do you have? We have XML Learner. Look at the files, maybe somewhere else. It should be XML Learner executable.
Maybe I don't have.
On the desktop?
Yandex.
So go to the XML, then double click on this.
Here?
Yeah. What do you have?
Version.
No. It's not. See, it extracted somewhere else. Try to do it again. Let's do it again. Go to the... No. What's this? On this. Don't extract. Double click on this. Okay, you have it. No extractions. Okay? So let's assume I have an application working in a company. I have an application, and this application essentially allows users to enter the personal data about the different person. And then when you click some button, like in this case, add form, add person, whatever, this information is going to be stored in an XML document or in a database or in other text files, whatever. Okay? But essentially, this application allows you to enter some information, and this application is going to store this information in one of the formats. Okay? So with the time, this turns out to be a very successful application. And assume I'm working as a configuration management engineer. Okay? So what my goal is, I go to the developers, ask the code for this application. I'm grabbing this code, and I'm creating this application from the source code. So that's my job description is. So basically, I'm taking the code and creating the application. And every time developers modifying these applications, like adding additional button here, or changing the color, or doing something else, they are creating new code. Basically, they modify new code. So this code is going to the QA engineers, to you. Okay, you are testing this application, making sure that alignment of the first name is correct, okay, to this text field. That text field is accepting values and it's not crashing, whatever. Basically passing all this QA cycle. And after QA lead gives OK to create a build, then it's my job to create the final build of this application from source code, package it or burn a CD and ship to the customers. Okay. Now, with the time, it turns out that this is a very successful application, so we have a lot of customers and everyone is happy. But with the time, we have new customers which come with their requirements. Say, we have different customers and they require different modification to this application. Some customers are not happy with this color. They don't like this gray color, essentially. They like something bright. Okay. Some customers are not happy with the layout of these text fields. They say, you know what, they are vertically aligned. We don't like that. We like these text fields to be horizontally aligned. Okay. Some customers, especially from France, think, you know what, this help menu, which which is called help, is not allowed in France. Okay. In France, we have to have question mark. Okay. So that's a regulation in France, French regulation, and they say, you know what, we are not allowed to have help menu item or help menu in the application. We should have question mark. Okay, so president or VP accepted all these requirements, and these requirements actually passed to developers. And what happens is that they created different versions of the same application. Okay, they say this is application -FR, which stands for French. Okay, we are going to change this menu from help to FR to question mark. This is the application for actually fancy users. We are going to put some coloration here, whatever. And then they create a different version of the same application. So you can imagine that load which goes to be, fall onto the QA engineer's heads is actually increasing, right? Now, instead of one application, you are going to test several applications because these are actually essentially changes in the code, and every change in the code should be tested. You cannot say, you know, this is almost the same. Okay, we can skip that. You cannot cut corners like that. And it's actually my load on my shoulders is also going to increase because I'm going to create more applications now, right, from the source code. Say if I was busy creating one application at a time, now I have to create maybe 5, 10, maybe 50, right? Who knows, depending how many customers I have. So what's the solution? Sorry? Solution is not to quit, right? Because I cannot handle 10 or 20 builds because that will be too much load, right? So what we can do, we can definitely send the settings here, would say configuration settings, but we don't like to expose that to the customers, okay? Because we don't trust customers saying, you know what, they can actually screw up, and that's too risky. We don't like the customers who modify the application to the possible extent, okay? So that will be a huge load for developers as well, and for QA engineers as well, because they have to test each version of the application. So what we can do, actually, we can we can modify the settings of this application. We can create definitely settings for this application and modify this application behavior to these settings, but do not expose these settings to the user. Do not have any menu here which says settings or under file menu saying settings, because that's not the case. Because people, actually customers in the US, are not interested in modifying help menu. Okay, help should be called help. Okay, only French customers are interested in having this question mark here instead of help. Okay, so we should be able to customize this application and modify according to the customer wishes, customer requirements. But the point here is that I don't like to expose this customization to the customers, one thing. Second is that I don't like this customization done on a code. Basically, I would like to keep only one version of the code, and then customization kind of a move out from this code. In that case, the developer will still working with one version of the application at a time, and CM manager, or me, actually going to work only with one version of the application. But I have a possibility to internally, or me or someone, or actually a sales engineer, they have possibility to internally switch this application according to the customer wishes. Essentially saying that this customization should be removed from the code. It should be separate, done separately. And which format I'm going to save this customization? Because customization is a data, right? It's basically customer wishes in a form of data. So as you may suspect, this customization can be done with XML document, right? It can be done in XML. And in that case, there is no need to go and dig deeper into the application code because there is no need for that, okay? So when you started this application, you should supposed to see this one, this main window. Now it's time to shut it down. When you shut this application down, you're supposed to see a new document which appears in the same folder where this application is located. If you extract it to the desktop and working with the desktop, you're supposed to see this upsetting XML document created on a desktop. In my case, I created this in a CXML folder. That's why I have these app settings created in my CXML folder. Make sure that you see this document. It's called app settings. It should be located in the same folder where your application XML learner is. If you don't see that, it means that either you forget the folder where you open, or you opening directly from a zip file. This XML document is not going to be created when you're working with a zip.
Just show that.
Okay? And then this XML document will be created as soon as you shut down the XML learner. Anyone experiencing problem with this? Okay. What we are going to do is we are going to investigate what this app setting document is. Okay. So we have to open it in a notepad. And this is the content of this XML app settings.xml. So, as you may suspect, this XML document contains configuration settings for the XML learner. Okay, so you see that the XML declaration is pretty long. Okay, it contains a lot of attributes. We can ignore them for now, but it has some values here, configuration values, which we can set and we can use. For example, it says menu background color and fields background color, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change this value from dark gray, because some customers like it very bright, right, to yellow, red, or pink. Okay, so okay, it's up to the customer. But I'm going to make sure that XML learner application is shut down. It's not up and running. Only this app settings is invoked. So instead of dark gray, I'm saying red. Okay, so or you can say yellow, pink, whatever you like, or magenta. Save this, saving this document, closing, and starting XML learner again. When I start XML learner, you'll see that the background of the text fields become red, as specified. What you need to do, you just open it in Notepad, app settings, open with the Notepad, and change this field's background color to red. Save this file, close it, and start XML learner. Okay, let's do it pink. Okay. You have to save it and close it. So we got it pink here. You have to save exactly as is. Just close the file, and then when it prompts it, say save. Okay? Don't change the name. Don't change the format.
Just save.
Just save, not save as. So you can play with the colors. It does not accept all colors. It accepts only 120 predefined colors. But these are pretty good range. Okay. Now we actually achieved one customization for one customer, right? Now we are going to satisfy French customer. Okay. In order to do that, we have to shut down the application. We have to again edit app settings file, and we're going to change this way. For example, you see it's an element which is called help menu name. Here, we are going to change this help to question mark. Okay. So that's the appearance of the help menu item. Save this. Okay. Help menu name should be question mark here. Okay, or whatever you like to put. You can test that way. So saving, and then if I open XML Learner, you will see that the help menu from help, the label it becomes question mark. All menu items remain unchanged. Just simply the name of the menu changed from help to question mark. Yes.
Could you repeat what we should change in the notepad?
Okay. For help menu, so we're going to App Settings, open with Notepad, and you see that the help menu name, by default you have help. You have to put question mark, or you can put several question marks. It's up to you. So just to test it. Okay. This is not good. I'm going to change the color to yellow. Okay. Save this guy. And if I invoke XML Learner next time, you will see that the changes actually are reflected. The background color of the text fields is yellow, and then help menu consists of 5 question marks. Okay, help menu item remains unchanged as about, but help menu itself name, the label, is changed to question mark. What else can you change? We're going to cover that in a sec. Okay. Now you can play with that, but remember when we started this application, I asked you to delete this app settings file. Remember that? App settings file, because this app settings file may be remaining from the previous class, and you would not see the application in its original form. Yes. Yes. First name, last name? This one? Text fields background? That's a good question. So let's discuss that. If we shut down the application and open app settings to config, this one. You see that I have limited number of customization implemented here. It does not mean that you cannot do that, but it means that you have to sit and code. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to put this everything in a code, so to make this application modification as detailed as possible. I did only allowed only few modifications for these settings. For example, I allowed help menu background color, couple of backgrounds color, and then control text. You can change this too, but nothing else. Okay. More customization you like to make, more coding or actually code modification, you have to sit and implement that in a code. Okay, I didn't have much time for that. That's why, but you can do that. But what it means that if you like to do customization, you have to have access to the source code of this application, right? Because you have to implement that in a source code. I lost source code. It's gone with my laptop. Okay, I don't have access to it. So, but nevertheless, even if I don't have access to the source code of application which I created, I still can modify it, because modification is done in XML outside of the source code. So most important is that when application is starting, when you double click this XML Learner, before XML Learner is shown on your screen, it does some actions. One of the actions is that it's looking for app settings file. If app settings file is not found, remember at the beginning, I ask you to delete this app settings file. When the app settings file is not found, then the default values are loaded. Okay, we don't see that process, but nevertheless this process happened. And then application appears as a gray background with a help menu and so on. Now, when app setting file is present, especially when we modify this app setting .xml file, then application reads the values which we specify there and behaves accordingly and shows these modifications. This happens very fast, but nevertheless this process is going on. That's why when you modify that, this XML Learner should be shut down. When you start it next time, these changes are picked up. Otherwise, they will not be picked up. Okay? So it means that you can customize any aspect, including background color of the text fields, default, whatever. Anything you see on the screen can be customized, but it requires more time. Okay? It's not coming by default. Okay. So, any questions?
Why background color change the letters on the actual
Where is
color of the letters?
where you see that customization?
When you change the background colors,
This one?
yeah,
This is actually is not changing the. It's control text. It's basically Windows defined color. It's not the text itself. If you say red,
yeah.
or actually let's say blue. Okay. So application is not running. That's good. Change this one. Save. XML learner. You see, yeah. this is the back color of this element. Okay, and the color of all text here. Yeah, I forgot how exactly implemented that. Most important that some of the modification you can do that. But you can modify this menu background color, text, and so on. Everything you like. It's probably incorrectly named background. It's a foreground color, not background color. Yeah, sorry for that. But essentially, is that important is that all changes you make are reflected. Okay. Now, any questions about this? So it should work. We should see modifications. Now, but that's not. That's only related to the modifications. We didn't touch the main goal of this application, which is responsible for accepting user input and saving this input, right? So make sure that the application is running, and then, yeah, one more thing. Let's assume I deleted these app configuration settings, completely deleted. So, and then if I start XML Learner, it does not find configuration file, so it actually loads the default values. That's what we saw for the first time. If you're happy with this, that's okay. If not, just you can you don't delete XML app settings that file. Now, what you need to do now is that you have to input information about several people, at least 2. When it comes to the relationship, don't type your relationship. Select from the drop-down menu. That's a bug in the application. It may crash. So when you fill out this form, add person and go to the next one. When you're done with the people, should be listed here. You basically click finish and that's it. Okay, that's what you need to do. At least 2. This exercise is easier than creating the XML file from scratch, right? Okay. After receiving confirmation message, dismiss that, shut down the application, and after shutting down the application, you expect to see another XML file, which is called relatives.xml, in the same folder. Okay? That relatives.xml file will contain all information which you inserted into this application. Make sure you can open it in the browser and view it. Really easy. Okay? To implement that feature, when you like to instruct the application to save data in XML file, couple of lines of code. It goes very fast. Okay? So basically, you dump all this information into the XML file. So where we can use this? Okay? Actually, a couple of questions can be asked here, and I expect you ask these questions. But if you don't, I ask myself. Okay? What's good of it? Okay? So you can send this XML file. It is an attachment to your email. Or you can actually print it out and send by mail, right, if you prefer that way. Or you can send by fax. And then a friend of yours, which you maybe live in other country or overseas, can use this XML file to load information back to this application. Okay, because if application can save the information which you inserted, right, so you can assume that it can also read this information and populate these fields or actually show you, at least show it to you, right? That's what we are going to explore. So it means that information flow is bidirectional. It goes either you can save it in the XML, it also can read the XML. Okay? When you save information in an XML file, it's called XML serialization, because essentially what happens is that when you insert information about personal information here, and this information is added here, this information is essentially located in the operational memory of the computer. It means that if you have power shut down or you shut down the application from console panel, this information will be gone. It's not preserved. Okay? When you click button finish, what happens is that information from operational memory is saved on a disk. which will survive the shutdown. Okay, when you shut down this computer and open and restarted it, go navigate to the same folder, you will see that relatives.xml will be preserved there. Okay, so basically information is preserved and is saved. If you don't save it, if you don't click finish, shut down the application, all this your insertion or whatever information you provided will be gone, because operation memory is clean between power cycles. Okay, so what happens is that when you save this information in the XML file, it says that we are serializing the data. That's a term which is called serialization. In this particular case, we call XML serialization because we save information in XML file. Now, when you send this XML file to your friend, who is maybe far away, he actually is doing reverse process to the serialization. He's actually reading the values from the document or from file and populating the operation memory, so this information is shown in the application, basically is available within the application. So this information is read from the file and put in the operation memory. So we are talking about the reverse process, which is called deserialization. Okay, we're placing this information from the file into the operation memory. You will hear this term, serialization and deserialization. This is explanation of it. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and try to read this relatives.xml file in this application. So what I do, I just click on this tab, which is called load.xml. And load.xml does not have any controls which allow us to read this relatives.xml. You probably explored that yourself, right? This is because we didn't put appropriate settings here in this application. We have to enable them. So shut down the application, XML for beginners, XML learner, and modify these app settings in Notepad. Essentially, you need to change this value. The last element here, it says is load button shown, and the value is false. It means that this load button is not shown. So what you need to do, you need to change this false to true. Okay, so that's a flag which allows this button to be shown. Okay, so that should be exactly the same case, lowercase t, true. Lowercase t, yeah, true. Okay, this is the last element in the application settings. After done that, you save these application settings. Simply close and say save, and start XML Learner again. After that, if you navigate to the Load XML tab, you should see that Open XML document is shown here. Okay, if you click on that, your relatives.xml file will be read and shown here. Please do that. I don't have that document. I might get an error. Yeah, see, it cannot find a document, so it informs me about that. Okay, but you are not supposed to see that error message because you have relatives.xml document. And when you see this XML, content of the XML document loaded here, you can save it as a text as well. Okay, so basically you can convert the format from XML to the text. If you like to, you can say save to the text, and this information will be saved in the textual format, plain text.
Show the save.
Sorry?
Show the save it as a text.
You can save this as a text, yeah, as a text format, in a text format. And here comes a very interesting question, which you're supposed to ask, but you don't. Just make sure that you see this information loaded. Okay, if you don't see it, just raise your hand, let me know. We'll fix that. Okay, all clear? Okay, question is that eventually, when we click on this button, information is saved as a text in a text file with extension txt, right? And the information is not gone. It's exactly the same information which you inserted into the application, and that information is eventually saved in the txt file. What the heck we are going to use XML file if eventually we can save the same information in a text file and work with the text file, right? We can use HTML, we can use INI file format, we can use text format, but why to go and invent so complicated system with the element naming convention, root element, encodings, whatever. It's complicated, right, if you compare with a normal text file. And the information is still there, right? What's the point of having XML?
To show us the US not good.
I can invent another language which is similar, and then basically I can invent many other languages like that. But there is a catch. That's actually a question which they might ask you on an interview, and that question, regardless of interview, you should know about that. Okay? So when we save this information in a text file format, we have no chance to verify and validate these values in a text file. Basically, with other words, if I specify numeric value for the first name, which doesn't make any sense. That person name is personal. It should not contain numbers. Or if I specify the person age as say 190, right, which doesn't make any sense. Textual format or text.txt file is not going to validate that, because whatever you put there, it will accept that and save it, but it will not tell you that, listen, something is wrong here. Correct? XML can do that. That's the beauty of it. Okay? In order to validate text file, you have to write an application which will parse this text format, analyze the values, and say, you know what, this is the first name specified as a number, which is not good, and this is the age, which is not good. But you have to sit and write these applications. Okay? In XML, it can be validated without this application. But that's the beauty of it. Okay? So that's what we are going to cover now. Any question about XML Learner? Because we are going to finish our work with this XML. No? Make sure that it's working. Okay, let's move forward then. Then reading, and we did that. And then before moving forward, there is another small exercise which is actually very useful to do. Here's the exercise. So assume that you are talking to your friend who never saw Notepad application. It's a lucky person, right? So no idea about computers. So you're talking over the phone, and your friend is asking you to describe the application so he can actually paint it and get an idea what Notepad is. Okay? So think from that point of view. You have to give him as much information about Notepad so he can get this information or the information and be able to recreate actually Notepad application, at least how it looks like. But this information you have to provide in XML format. Basically, you have to create an XML document which will describe this Notepad application. Can we do that? Definitely we can, because we know what the root element is, we know how to name elements, and we can do that. Let's start. Yep, okay. So remember, the keywords here is that you should be able to describe this application to your friend. And if I don't mention XML, then there is no problem, right? You can imagine yourself talking to your friend, describing all this application in details. Problem comes when you think about XML. So first of all, this application looks rectangular, right? It's a rectangular shape, so I can say shape rectangular. I can also specify its vertical and horizontal sizes, so that will be more detail. I mean, we can actually reconstruct this application in great details. After all, we can say this rectangular is split by 3 horizontal lines into 3 parts. Actually, 2 horizontal lines into 3 parts. So major part, which occupies maybe 98% of the whole screen, of all this rectangular, is white. And there, in this part, you can type some text. Whatever you put on a keyboard is going to appear here. Now, the rest of the 2% is split between, say, actually split equally between 2 stripes. And one stripe is located at the top, which has green, blue background color, and has a title. It's actually text typed on it, Untitled Notepad. We can say title, Untitled Notepad. It has icon present, Notepad icon present on the top left corner. And then it has standard Windows control, which is minimize, maximize, and close. And these controls are present in exactly the same order, and they are enabled. This is information. This is the data, right? As soon as it's data, you should be able to put in XML format. After that, you have a second stripe. It contains some text, which when you click on it, it will show some drop-down menus. The texts are file, edit, format, view, and help. Definitely you can go deeper and describe what exact menu items you have under each menu, but that will be too long. Okay, we don't have much time for that right now. So let's go back to the editor itself. So in this window, as we agreed, we actually can see text which we type in on a keyboard. This window has a vertical scroll bar which is present, but it's not enabled. It's disabled, right? This is information. Background of this editor is white, and this is a text which we type here appears in a specific font, right? We can specify the font, we can specify the size, we can specify the style. And this text, which is currently present, is this is a sample. This is sample text type in Notepad, and the cursor is placed at the last letter. This is information we should be able to put there. Is this text highlighted or selected? No. This is information we should be able to put that here, and so on. And then they think that an XML document may contain maybe say 1,000 different elements, but more information we put in this XML document, easier will be to reconstruct this application, and easier will be for your friend to reconstruct it, right? So that's important. We can do that. So do you agree, or do you have something to add? So next exercise is just, this is actually one of the example of that. It's not an answer in any way. This is just basically some very scratching on the surface. Okay, you can do it this way. Now, next exercise is just describing Windows Explorer. No, just joking. Okay, if we are going to do it, we are going to stay here until tomorrow. Okay, in the morning. Okay, but just imagine we actually increase the complexity of the application, and then it means that XML file will be much bigger. Okay, because you have address bar, you have toolbars, you have buttons, and so on, so on, so on. So it's basically too much. We are going to skip this exercise, but just an example. Okay. Next thing, which why is it here? It's okay. So so far we covered the basics of XML, and that's as much XML as you can learn if you're working in a company. Because you will learn probably, if you haven't attended this school or this class, you will learn that there is a XML format, which basically is a text format, but it has some rules like presence of the XML declaration, XML root element, XML elements, values, and so on. You can learn it pretty quickly. Okay, it's not a big deal. And then, if any company you go, as I already said, you will face XML. So you'll find yourself modifying, creating, or doing something with XML files. So you cannot escape that. Okay. But the question which I asked and I haven't answered yet is that what's the beauty of XML? Why we use XML format compared with a Notepad or other textual formats? Because as we already seen, we can save the information which we would like to save in any format, right? Including the TXT format, and the information will be there. We can restart the machine, computer, and then information will not be gone. Okay, they will be stay there. So let's discuss this question in details. Essentially, what we cover so far is officially called well-formed XML document. Okay, so these are one of the two very important concepts in the XML, and that's what we already learned so far. A well-formed XML document is a document which has correct XML syntax. Essentially, it means that if you create an XML document, you load it in a browser, and it's loaded correctly, then it means that the browser verified the correctness of the XML document, and then we can say that this document is well-formed. If you made some mistake, like forgot about the root element, about the case sensitivity element, created element incorrectly, then it will be not well-formed XML document. So these are actually highlighting of highlighting these rules. All elements should be case sensitive with the closing ones, counterparts. Have root element should be present there. Case sensitivity should be preserved, and then nesting should be done properly, and then all attribute values should be quoted, and so on. Then definitely the rules for naming elements should be applied here as well. Okay, I'm not listing them here. So next concept, any questions about this well-formed concept? No? Okay. So it should be pretty clear, because we actually dedicated first part of the XML class, or actually more than one half of the XML class, to describe this well-formed XML document. Next concept, which actually might be hidden from you, even if you work for the company for several years, people may not even have any idea about this concept, which is called valid XML document. And this concept actually explains why we actually stick to the XML format rather than using a different formats, plain text formats. So valid XML document, or actually validity of XML document, the concept of called valid XML document, is XML document which conforms to the DTD. Okay, it may look simple on this slide, but nevertheless it does not explain. Okay, what does it mean? Okay, first of all, a confirmation to the DTD, what the DTD is. The DTD is abbreviated as document type definition. It stands for document type definition. But still, even if I explain you the abbreviation, it does not tell you the whole story, right? So what the type definition is. So essentially, why we created the DTD, why companies use DTD, and why they had to invent this concept. So remember, when we started learning XML, I told you that you are pretty much free of creating all elements you like to use. Okay, you agree that you're following the standards, you're following the rules, but you're still free of creating a bunch of new elements. And if you work in a company, and then the company is working on creating the application which handles personal information, pretty much like XML Learner does. So what may happen in reality is that we may have different group of developers sitting in different places. It might be the same building, might be, say, world apart. And if we give them freedom of creating their own elements, then sooner or later that will be a mess. Okay? Because one developer may call first name as one word without underline. Another developer group may use element first name as a first underscore element, first name, first underscore name. And that will be a mess. So they would, bottom line is the XML documents which are created by one group could not be read by applications which are created by second group. Basically that will be big miscommunication. Just at the beginning. It might be even result in data loss and so on, okay, or more dangerous stuff. So what happens is that company would decide sooner or later that it should be this document, or actual XML document which we are going to create, which will store personal information, should be standardized. Okay. So remember, when we were creating our first XML document, I say you are allowed to use only these 5 elements: first name, last name, and so on. Okay, that can be regarded as a standard. Okay, so that's pretty much how it would look like. For example, companies say, you know what, this is a document which will describe what element you are allowed to use, and then they will send this document on email, publish on wiki, and so on. And every developer, before doing anything, should read this document over and over again. Okay, but that would not help, because some new developer may come and make a mistake, okay, or just he may introduce his own value. So there is no guarantee that we are protected against possible risk of introducing new elements and thus breaking the whole system, right? So it means that we have to enforce this standardization more rigorously, rather than relying on published newsletters, standards, and so on. So what happens is that we can create another document which will describe these rules and put this document within each computer, right? Or actually publish on the internet. So every time computer reads XML document, it will actually automatically reach the standards. Okay? And every time XML document arrives at the computer, then verification will be made against the standards automatically on the computer level, not on a human level, but at computer level. And if there is some discrepancy, like unknown elements, may be valid, but still unknown, or some values are not correct, then computer will raise an error, okay, issue immediately, without human intervention. And that document, which will describe internal standard, and these are standardization within the company, not globally, but within the company, is called DTD, document type definition. Companies say, you know what, every time you create an XML document, this XML document should have these elements only. Not other elements, but exactly these elements with this case, with this spell, exactly. And the values which are contained in XML document should also be valid. For example, you can specify the validity of human personal age, like It may be, say, age between 0 and 120, which makes sense, right? And so on. And all difficult aspects of the values you are going to store in XML. Text file or other files will not allow you to do this verification easily. Okay? So that's the purpose of this DTD, which, as I state here, it defines the legal elements of all XML documents, and not only legal elements. Legal elements, you should read the elements, essentially, but the values which these elements keep. Okay. So let's have a look. That's explanation what I already said. You can specify which element and which order they appear. Basically, you can specify every single step in XML document. It's up to you. It's a standardization document which allows to go to the every single detail, every possible detail. And here's an example. Okay, it's better to look at the example than talk about that a lot. In this particular case, these two documents, DTD and XML document, are located within the same file. It is possible to do. You can have separate files. You can put in the same file. So you see that this is not exactly XML syntax. It's different syntax. Because it's a different language. We are not going to learn that, and you are most probably are not going to be involved with that. Okay, because it's not done very frequently. You create standards once and for all, right? And you modify that very randomly. I mean, very seldom. So it means that QA engineers practically not involved with that. But you should nevertheless have the idea about this concept, and you have to know about this. Okay. So this first part, which starts here and ends here, is actually DTD. It's a description of the standard, and it says that what standard is that it says that root elements should be relatives, and then relatives should contain person. That's the hierarchy. After that, we have element person, which should contain these elements only in this case. Okay. After that, it goes through this grandchildren, relationship, first name, last name, age, occupation, and country, and it tells what it is. It's basically not a binary data, but character data. It's past character data. It's basically textual format, to be simply. And that's the end of the standard. So it means that if a computer receives two documents, one is DTD, another is XML, and it turns out that in XML you use age, for example, lowercase h, that will be violation of the standard. Okay, immediately. So it means that we can validate the format of the XML document, the element names, using this DTD. Okay. So a good thing here is that you don't need to learn DTD, because that's another language, because you will not be involved in that. Okay. But that's any questions before we move forward? No, pretty clear. Okay. And then people who are involved in creating standard, definitely they have to learn and they have to know this DTD language together with XML. Okay. Now this is not, we can also have DTD saved somewhere else. We can have another document which is called relatives.dtd, which is located in a different file. Not exactly in the same XML, but in different place. It might be located on a server, might be on internet, doesn't matter. Most important is that this should be reachable. Okay, so and then computer takes this DTD and takes a XML and then validates the XML document. Okay. Next thing is that you can define in a separate DTD in a separate file, but if you are involved with this, you have to learn a DTD language, which turns out to be inconvenient because you have to know another language. With the time, this problem was overcome, but with the DTD you can specify, reiterate that, you specify every single aspect of XML. You can specify every single value, whatever, ranges of values, elements, order of elements, nesting, and so on. Okay, and the beauty of DTD is that we can validate the validity of the data which is received prior this data goes into your application. Just imagine you have two application XML learners, and this XML learners application exchange data constantly. We add new people, and then we send these new people to the probably central location of the friends. Okay, and then if operator made a typo or something similar error, or error is introduced during the transmission of the data, then the receiving station receives this document and is capable of immediately validating this data. For example, if the age is inserted incorrectly, or element is missing, or something like that, then we can immediately catch this error before putting this into the database, because at that moment that will be too late. Okay, just imagine that medical institution exchanges data, a huge amount of data going from one computer one place to another, and then if we can catch the errors at that moment, that will be much less costly than compared with the situation when this information is stored in a database, and sooner or later someone will discover that, you know what, my birth date is not that. Okay, it's actually indicated incorrectly. Okay, just imagine how many angry people will call to them and ask for change data. Okay, so this is actually example of how we can not only validate the elements but also element values. For example, we can validate that the age cannot be 200, that the age can be only whole number, not a fractional, and so on. We can do that. And then we can also validate that the relationship, for example, a relationship element can also only take specified values like parents, siblings, children only. Okay, basically close relatives, but nothing, not friends, not classmates, and so on. Okay, we can do that. We can do this validation. This validation can be done earlier, and you know, probably from the QA methodology class. Earlier you catch the defect, less costly it is. Okay, so that's exactly follows this scenario. So with the time, it turns out that the DTD turns out to be not very convenient because, first of all, it is a different language. Okay, in order to create a standardization document, you have to learn another language, and this was actually fixed. I would say fixed. They created another language which is exactly XML, based on XML. It's called XML schema. So the difference between DTD and XML schema is in the following. The XML schema using XML language. It's written in XML. So it has same goals as DTD, but it's done better. Because if you need to create standardization document, you don't need to learn another language. As soon as you know XML, you can create the standardization document in XML. So, and the DTD will be obsolete in future. That's obviously. And then this XML schema definition, there are applications available which can create it for you. Okay, if you feed the XML document, they can go and create this standardization document for you. Actually, the skeleton, you have to modify it, but at least the core of the standardization document will be created for you. That's another plus for the XML schema. So again, as in the case of the DTD, you can define everything which every single detail of XML, the order of child elements, what child elements are, values, ranges, and so on. So XML schemas are written in XML. They support data types. We are going to talk about that, and the namespaces. That's also very important. So basically, everything is done to make the validation as easy as possible and more rigorously than as rigorously as possible. So before going into and discussing this XML schema, let's talk about the data types.